No. So finally, this is our last slide deck for the exam, right? And quiz, I think a lot of people struggled. At least I got the feedback from the TA. But I had gone very, very slow on this topic and covered at a very high level. But understand the conceptual thing, right? If you understand the concepts, thing will be very, very easy. So on premises, we have in Windows service called in Windows Server, right? So I'll make some notes over here. Windows Server, it has ADDS, okay? Or let me just make it simple. Okay, आपका विंडोज सर्वर के अंदर सर्विसेज हैं, there are different services and one of the services ADDS, और जिस सर्वर के ऊपर आप कॉन्फ़िगर करते हो ADDS, that is called a domain controller. Okay, and you can replicate domain controllers, right? For high availability, ठीक है? तो एक सर्विस है ADDS, and you start running. This is basically a domain controller, and ADDS service is basically right. So ADDS is a service. It's a network service. It uses LDAP protocol and primarily port 389, right? So anybody who needs to talk to it, it needs to use this port, right? अब उसके अंदर क्या होता है? It is a directory. It is a directory for the organization, right? So what happens is that it stores things. It stores users, computers, groups, and various different things. You can configure many, many different things. You can deploy applications using directory services. क्योंकि आपके पास ग्रुप्स हैं, आपके पास यूजर्स हैं, आप कहते हो ये ग्रुप, ये यूजर्स हैं, इनको ये इनके मशीन्स के ऊपर ये चीज़ डिप्लॉय कर दो, ये कंप्यूटर्स हैं, इसके ऊपर ये चीज़ डिप्लॉय कर दो, राइट? When somebody logs in, you can assign different policies for them. So you can control anything and everything centrally using directory services. It's a very, very powerful service. इसका टॉप लेवल कंटेनर फॉरेस्ट है. फॉरेस्ट के अंदर आपकी पूरी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन होती है. फॉर एग्जांपल माइक्रोसॉफ्ट का जो फॉरेस्ट है दैट इज microsoft.com. उसके बाद इट्स डिवाइडेड इनटू मेनी डिफरेंट डोमेन्स, ठीक है? तो ये मेरा रूट फॉरेस्ट है, इसके बाद चाइल्ड डोमेन्स हैं microsoft.com, देन middleeast.microsoft.com, corp.microsoft.com, northamerica.microsoft.com, on and on and on, okay? And they have trust relationships with each other. We can access anything in the top domain, everybody can access each other, right? But they're all managed independently, right? There are different teams in each geographic region who are managing those domains. Okay? तो डोमेन के अंदर में which makes sense. Now हमारा मिडल ईस्ट का जो डोमेन है, it contains all the people in Middle East, right? In the Middle East region, whatever the Middle East region contains, whether it's the UAE, Saudi, Oman, and whatever, right? It has all those things, right? All those people, all those groups, all those computers, right? A domain provides authentication because जब आपने user वहाँ create कर दिया, of course it has the password also, so that's what it does, right? So authentication, authorization service, right? and it is also replication boundary. Forest was also replication boundary. आप पूरा forest कर दो replicate, आप पूरा domain replicate कर दो. You can control those things, right? You can control at a forest level, replicate. You can replicate at a domain level. You can do whatever you want, right? ये screens थी to add users, add computers, add groups. यहाँ पे members add कर लो, different users हैं and different things, right? इसमें हम कहते हैं security and distribution. Security group is where you can assign these groups under role-based access control, right? So if I go into Azure, and I say over here home, and I go into my subscription, right? So security groups are used to manage security, right? So if I come over here, add role assignment, I give a role, I pick a role, let's say reader. यहाँ पे जो members हैं, I can select a group. I can select a security group. I'm seeing if कोई group है अगर all के नाम से. ठीक है, यहाँ पे आपको दिखा रहा है सिक्योरिटी ग्रुप, राइट? सो सिक्योरिटी ग्रुप इज यूज्ड टू मैनेज security and access and authorization at a group level. Instead of adding individually people, I can add a group. So I can add only a security group. I cannot add a distribution group, right? Understand this difference. So distribution group, when I mark something as distribution group, this is basically an email group only. It is not used to manage security. So it's very simple, right? If you think conceptually, अगर मैं अब वो ग्रुप जो बना हुआ है वो when I create a distribution group, it creates an email address. जिस तरह आपका आता है all CS 4037 people, right? That's a distribution group. Similarly, if I create a security group, I cannot add that group into over here in the role-based access control. क्यों? क्योंकि वो तो email address है. Distribution group is just an email address, whereas over here it's an actual object which I can control, which these guys can control, right? Active Directory can control and check if you are there or not, right? If you're part of that group or not. But email group, it has no checks. It is simply an email thing, right? So understand this thing very clearly, security and distribution group, and why we cannot use either one of them, either or, in the other things place, right? So Entra ID is again, it's a service. ये again आपका quiz का question है, nothing special. You can pick any one of these things. IDEA is a cloud-based identity and access management service, right? It's a SaaS service. It's not a PaaS. It's not IaaS. It's a SaaS service, right? You should understand this one. यहाँ पे Microsoft is managing everything. You just add your users and manage them. That's it, right? They will take care of everything else. So to have the same IDs and passwords over here from your on-premises Active Directory, then you use ID Connect, Entra ID Connect, right? Again, straight from the quiz, and it does the synchronization of these objects. और password hash के अंदर, as I explained in the class as well, right? There are three things. You don't have to sync. You can sync one way, or you can sync two ways. That means you can change it on the cloud, and it will synchronize back to on-premises, which is generally what's done, right? So you don't have to call and ask and email somebody to reset your password. You can do it yourself. इसमें जो important चीज़ है, that is for IT admins, right? um, आप what you can do Entra ID is to control access to applications. आप हर चीज को you can bind. जिस तरह Azure है, somebody has registered Entra ID with Azure as well, with Office 365 as well, and you can do the same thing to do manage your Google Cloud as well, right? All these they support. हमारा Google Cloud is using Google owns identities, but I can bring my own identities from Entra ID and do that, right? हमारे लिए for us we need to understand app developers that we can use Entra ID to do SSO single sign on कि एक आपका आइडेंटिटी है यूजर आईडी पासवर्ड है you can use the same Entra ID to authenticate on your applications, right? This is what you can do. So उसके अंदर what will happen is that आपको you don't have to do anything. ना आपको ज़रूरत है उसकी you will just redirect to Entra ID and Entra ID will take care of all the authentication and will log user in your application, right? वो आपको बता देगा it's a member of certain group or not if you want to give a higher access or higher functionality in the application. So it does a lot of those things, right? So we need to understand what IT administrators can use this for, app developers for, and of course users. आप जाके अपना पासवर्ड रीसेट कर लो, अपने सेल्फ सर्विस एट्रीब्यूट्स अपने चेंज कर लो, अपना एड्रेस if company allows you to change your address, phone number and what not, right? So it can allow you to do all of those things. Again, this is what we discussed already. फिर हमने बताया था कि ये मैंने अगेन क्विज का क्वेश्चन था बेसिकली वेयर इसके अंदर जो है so on-premise AD we read it is based on LDAP. जो Entra ID है, this is Entra ID actually. ये पिक्चर पुरानी है, ये पुराना नाम था Azure AD, okay? So wherever you see an Azure AD is actually Entra ID, okay? तो यहाँ पे it's a domain services. तो हमारी domain services थी on premises. They were using LDAP, right? So anybody who needs to talk to on-premises Active Directory, it were using our LDAP. Now we move to the cloud. Cloud means not there, but our services still want to move to cloud. So they are asking, okay, how can we use LDAP-based service? We cannot use this latest standards, which is based on HTTPS and other technologies. We want to be able to talk to our LDAP. So what you do is, Microsoft gave us something called Entra Domain Services. Nothing special. This is simply a smaller version of this, virtual machines running and everything, right? It's exactly same thing, this thing given to you as a service, okay? Entra Domain Service is essentially, let me see if I can type it. This is basically okay, they're giving ADDS as a PaaS service. Okay, that's all it is. But you need to be able to get all this information. तो information किस तरह यहाँ पे आपने यहाँ तक sync की थी AD connect से, then you just simply bind this one. ये automatically जब बनाते हो ना Entra Domain Services, वो कहता है कि आपने इसको किससे synchronize करना है, and you give your Entra ID tenant, right? Microsoft.com or whatever it is, right? Or fast.nu.edu, whatever. And it automatically gets, you can see, gets all the users, groups, and passwords over here as well, right? So that's the idea, right? Entra Domain Services is given to you as ADDS as a PaaS service, simply because your applications need to talk to LDAP for them so they can work on it, right? That's all there is. So lift and shift migrations के अंदर we create this thing so we can use those applications which cannot work with the Entra ID. That's all there is, okay? This is ADDS as a service. And idea is, how do you get the information, which is user groups and passwords, is you first synchronize through AD Connect, and this one is internally bound. When you create this one, it says, okay, which tenant you want to bind to, you give this tenant and it automatically synchronizes. And it's one-way synchronization. You cannot change any information over here. Okay, this is one of the limitations. So it's very critical to understand. With Entra ID, you can do bi-directional synchronization, password, user information, group information. But here it's one way. It's read only. Okay, only for applications to get the information using LDAP protocol. That is the idea. Understand these things. Otherwise, there is nothing special. Last but not least, ये हम आगे भी आएंगे. Actually, I want to move this one to over here. यहाँ पे मैं this one. This one should be moved back also, right? Authentication is, it makes sure it's you based on the credentials, based on multi-factor authorization, based on whatever the different things are. It checks if it's you, it verifies, right? And authorization is, it's you, but are you allowed to access what you're trying to access? That is authorization. ठीक है, जिस तरह आपका ग्रुप है सिक्योरिटी का, वट एवर दैट इज, यहाँ पे आप जाते हो और यू चेक बेसिकली के डू यू क्या आपका कार्ड बन जाए. वो आपकी इंफॉर्मेशन देख के आपको वेरीफाई करके आपका कार्ड बना देते हैं. Then card authorizes you to access various different departments in the university, right? वहाँ पे आपको ऑथेंटिकेट किया था, ऑथेंटिकेट करके आपका आईडी कार्ड दे के विद वॉट एवर, राइट, दे गेव यू योर कार्ड and that allows you to do access various different departments in the university and services. ये ओवरऑल पिक्चर है इसकी होल प्रोसेस की. ऑन प्रेमिस एक्टिव डायरेक्टरी, एडी कनेक्ट से आपकी एक्टिव डायरेक्टरी के अंदर आइडेंटिटी आ गई, राइट? और आपने बाहर से भी इनवाइट कर सकते हो आप. दिस कॉल एक्सटर्नल आइडेंटिटीज. If you look at your whole picture now, आपकी आइडेंटिटीज थी, आपने इनको एजुअल एक्टिव डायरेक्टरी और एंट्रा आईडी में आपने मूव किया, सिंक्रोनाइज किया. आपने बाहर से और आइडेंटिटीज को और लोगों को डिफरेंट कंपनी से आपने ऐड किया. So they can work on your applications, they can work with you on your as a vendors, as contractors, whatever, right? Sometimes इनकी teams आती हैं to implement something, you can add them as external users, right? So they can using the same policies, MFA, all those things, right? And conditional access, right? All what is available to you in Active Directory on Entra ID, they can follow the same thing and access your resources, access your business applications, right? कभी कभी accounting teams होती हैं, auditing teams होती हैं from third party companies, they want to access your internal systems. This is precisely what you do. आप कहते हो कि identities लेके आओ जिस मर्जी सिस्टम की हैं, we will add them as external users and from here you will authenticate and then you can use your applications, right? Entra ID को आप कॉन्फ़िगर कर सकते हो विद ऑल ऑफ दीज एप्लीकेशंस एज वेल. अगर आप ऑफिस यूज़ कर रहे हो, जी स्वीट यूज़ कर रहे हो, सेल्सफोर्स, SAP, वॉट एवर, राइट, यू कैन यूज द सेम Entra ID. Microsoft and these application vendors have worked together to make sure this can be bound to your services, all these cloud services that you're using. दैट वे आपका वही आईडी पासवर्ड है, सेम पॉलिसीज, MFA जो भी अपने सेटअप किया हुआ है एंट्रा आईडी के अंदर, कंडीशन एक्सेस की हुई है. वंस इट ऑथराइजेज विद ऑल दोज थिंग्स यू कैन एक्सेस इट, राइट? सो वेरी वेरी अमेजिंग सर्विस दैट यू हैव ओवर हियर, राइट? इसके अंदर मैं दो चीज़ें बताई थी आपको, B2B एंड B2C. B2B is to collaborate with external users. ओके, आप ये यूजर्स हैं, एक्सटर्नल यूजर्स, आप इनको एंट्रा आईडी में ऐड करते हो, इनवाइट करते हो. वंस दे आर एडेड दे कैन वर्क ऑन योर एप्लीकेशंस इंटरनली ऑन ऑल योर स्टफ, राइट? कस्टम डेवलप जो एप्लीकेशन आपकी एंट्रा आईडी से सिक्योर हुई है उन सारी के ऊपर ये दे कैन वर्क ऑन इट, राइट। दिस इज बी टू बी कोलैबोरेशन। आप उन आईडीज को एक्सेस देते हो अपने इंटरनल सिस्टम्स के ऊपर, आपका एंट्रा आईडी। सो बेसिकली दिस व्हाट हैपेंस, जस्ट टू शो यू। दिस इज बी टू बी फंक्शनैलिटी। आप यहाँ पे जाते हो, you go into users and you say invite external users, right? Users, add user, and I say invite external user. This is B2B functionality. I can invite anybody based on your organization ID or based on your, for example, I can say, for example, ये इनविटेशन चलेगी, मुझे इनविटेशन आएगी, आई कैन एक्सेप्ट एंड आई बी पार्ट ऑफ दिस एंट्रा आईडी। उसमें अगर एमएफए की पॉलिसीज है, नाउ आई नीड टू मेक श्योर आई एम कॉन्फ़िगर्ड विद एमएफए, otherwise I'll not be able to log in into this one and access any of this stuff, right? So जो आपकी policies होंगी, anybody who gets invited, he follows all of the same policies, okay? This is the nice part in this one. फिर है B2C, आपकी एप्लीकेशन है विच इज़ कन्फिगर्ड विद एजर एंट्रा आईडी, आपकी वेब एप्लीकेशन है, वॉट एवर कस्टम एप्लीकेशन है, राइट। यू अलाउ यूजर्स टू कम इन। तो जिस तरह आप किसी भी एप्लीकेशन दराज पे जाते हो, फॉर दराज.pk, इट आस्क्स यू कैन लॉग इन यूजिंग गूगल आईडी। आप अली एक्सप्रेस पे जाते हो, इट सेज गूगल और वॉट एवर, राइट। दिस इज प्रिसाइजली वॉट एजर एंट्रा आईडी अलाउज यू टू डू। वो कहते हैं लेट देम ब्रिंग योर अदर आईडीज एंड आई विल वर्क विद द अदर सिस्टम टू ऑथेंटिकेट द यूजर फॉर यू। इट्स ऑल प्लग एंड प्ले, यू डोंट हैव टू डू एनीथिंग। आपकी एप्लीकेशन इज सिटिंग बिहाइंड इट, they can log in, it will make sure that you are logged in with your provider, with the Facebook or Entra ID or Google or whatever, right, with Gmail, and then you can log in into your application. It's all plug and play. So when you allow them to use your application, your published application, that is B2C. When you want them to work on your internal applications, internal system, that is B2B. It allows you to both of those things, right? अगर मैं अभी किसी को एजर के ऊपर आने दूं, अपने एजर के ऊपर सब्सक्रिप्शन को पे एक्सेस दे दूं, that will be B2B. मेरा बिजनेस फंक्शनैलिटी है, बिजनेस एप्लीकेशन है, हमारे बिजनेस टेनेंट है, and I'm giving you access on that one, right? But go over these one external identities, right? It's very critical. Condition access is yes, you're authorized, yes, you are authenticated, but it uses other factors to see whether you're allowed or not. आपकी certain group membership है, IP location है, किस device से आप कर रहे हो, किस application में कर रहे हो, and various different factors it can do, and it can see whether it can allow or deny you, even though you are authenticated already. Okay, so it's a different level of access. It can also say, okay, if you are part of a group, if you are an admin, you must do XYZ things more. You must do another level of MFA. And this is what lot of companies do, right? For admin, it has another level of authentication and authorization, basically. You can ask for an OTP for admins, which you might not require for regular user. Regular user सिर्फ authenticator होगा, इनके लिए आप OTP भी add कर सकते हो. So you can do all of those things, right? These are all the different details. तो बेसिकली एंट्रा आईडी, यहाँ से अपने यूजर्स हैं, आपके ग्रुप्स हैं, एप्लीकेशंस हैं, एंड बेसिकली व्हाट इज हैपनिंग इज एसेंशियली यू हैव आपके बेसिकली क्या हो रहा है यहाँ पे एंट्रा आईडी। सो आपने सारा कुछ एब्स्ट्रैक्ट कर दिया, आपने एंट्रा आईडी टेनेंट लिया और आपने उसको एजर के साथ अटैच कर दिया, आपने उसको ऑफिस 365 के साथ अटैच कर दिया। यू टुक दिस सर्विस एंड गेव एक्सेस टू डिफरेंट यूजर्स ऑन डिफरेंट थिंग्स, राइट। तो एजर की जो रोल बेस्ड एक्सेस कंट्रोल है इज बेस्ड ऑन एंट्रा आईडी। सो यू कैन गिव टू एज अ सब्सक्रिप्शन लेवल at a resource group level and at resource level. And you can give very, very fine grained permissions, right, based on identities and applications and whatnot, right, in this one. So you can have extremely fine grained control based on Entra ID identity and the roles in Azure. Azure defines all the roles and you can map for this role. For example, just like I was doing, it was giving me all sort of different roles. I can map any identity from over here, any user, any group to that specific permission. This is role-based access control, right? Then you come to zero trust. Zero trust में हमने कहा था you have a centrally managed system and you are basically controlling with a central policy of each and everything, right? Everything is shut down, is closed by default. You're opening up only as needed to the person who is required. You are not opening up for everyone, right? Each person who is authorized will be given access, minimum access as possible as required, nothing more. This is the idea of zero trust, right? Make sure you go over this one. So defense in depth is essentially, it's a layered approach, right, to securing everything. So physical layer is the first one, is the main one, first line of defense. कि data center में who can come in, who cannot come in, right? Then उसके बाद we have identity and access layers basically, right? कि उसमें the physical security के अंदर physical parameters के अंदर systems हैं, who can log into them, right? उसके बाद I can see कि जो systems आ गए उनको how they are defended when traffic is coming in, right? उसके अंदर जो perimeter layer है, सबसे जो outward layer है, from where traffic comes in from networking, am I able to defend that? The DDoS attack हुआ है, somebody is trying to use bots, thousands of them, to bring down my service, am I able to protect, right? Then once the traffic comes in, right, traffic comes in, उसके अंदर कोई अटैक हो सकता है जिस तरह एप्लीकेशन लेवल अटैक है. It's a good service, but it is trying to do, for example, like SQL injection. It is trying to hack the application. Am I able to protect against those things, right? Against the compute, against the application, right? Sorry, this is the compute. Then application level is SQL injection and those kind of things, right? And then in the end, for example, data, right? Is it properly protected? Okay, only the application that is required to get that is able to protect that data, access that data only. Nobody else can. And the application that is there, is it able to get only the data that it needs? कोई और database में तो नहीं connectivity हो रही, right? So it's very critical to understand and be able to do these things, right, at each level. Okay, what do we mean and what we are trying to do in this defense in depth? Last but not least is have visibility over all of these things, and that's where Defender comes in. So it can check at all these layers what are the controls, where the vulnerabilities are, and give you a high level view of everything that's happening. ठीक है, आपका DDoS अटैक हो रहा है, आपका नेटवर्क अटैक हो रहा है, अब कहीं कुछ हो रहा है, एप्लीकेशन में vulnerability है, कहीं आपने कोई लूज कंट्रोल्स हैं, whatever the layered approach we have on the defense, it shows us all the vulnerability. It scans at all the different levels and shows you everything what is happening, right? This is the beauty of this one. कि हमारा जो पूरा layered approach थी, it checks at all levels and gives us a view of all that. And then it has a very nice thing, something called secure score, right? And secure score is basically the way it's calculated is each vulnerability based on its criticality it's given a score. और उस सारे स्कोर को accumulate करके उसी percentage निकाल के it tells us हमारा क्या secure score है, ठीक है? तो यहाँ पे it's telling us कि हमारा 71% secure score है, right? And we can take a look कि what is happening. हमारी क्या vulnerabilities हैं, right? So it gives us an idea that seems to be a pretty much secured environment. Maybe because vulnerabilities are not there, maybe its resources are very minimal, whatever it is, right? It's giving us a good fact that we are above average sort of. Again, you want to be above maybe 80-90%, but it's telling us that we need some work to be done, right? Also, it tells us that we don't have any critical issues, no high issues, mostly medium, some medium, and mostly low vulnerability issues, right? So it gives us a very nice way for the management to be able to see what is happening in the environment and how much the secure is, right? How much environment is properly secured, right? So अब जैसे आपके critical होंगे, the score will drop drastically, right? As you have critical and high risks are identified, right? So that's the security posture, how the security looks, and all those things. Okay. Any questions? Anything?